So comparing feeds, we can also, and I'm not going to bore you with the maths on all this because there's something really cool that DPI have done that I want to show you. Okay, you can look at your cost per megajoule and compare feeds that way as well. All right, so we can work that out with a bit of mathematics. All right, and for example, the oat hay, which was 400 a tonne compared to the barley at 280, the cost per megajoule was cheaper in the oats. Okay, because at the end of the day, if we're trying to feed cows and get milk, that's what we want. Yeah, so it's actually better buying. Okay, similarly you can do it per kilo of protein in the feed, all right? But this is the thing that I reckon that Josh showed me, hats off, that I wasn't aware of set out, but this is Drought Calculator App. This is a really cool little gizmo, all right? You can basically download this onto your smartphone. You can put on the farm the landed price, you put in the dry matter percent, you put in the energy and the protein, and you can do that on two or three different feeds, and then you can flick between the screens. All right, and it just gives you those comparative costs. So the megajoule per tonne is fed, it tells you the cost per cents per megajoule, so this one's a bit cheaper. The dollar per kilo protein, this one's more expensive in this situation, okay? And the cost per tonne of dry matter is there as well. So again, if you want to do some basic comparisons on farm, when you've got two feed tests in front of you and you don't have someone to talk to, this is actually an app which I think is a really cool app. I don't use lots of them, but this is one I think should be on most of your phones if you're buying feeds, right? Because it does all that math in the background. It's actually, there's a feed base, but when you go into it, there's a feed base which has got some book values for all of these feeds, but you can edit them with the actual feed tests. So I'd strongly recommend this. The only criticism I'd have is it doesn't have an NDF slide on it, right? It's actually relying on ME, and ME tends to be a proxy calculation based on the digestibility of the feed, but it's a lot better than nothing. This is cool.
Yeah, one of the benefits I'd have with it as well, not so much with dairy farmers because they're putting across some of the stuff.
Yep.
Some beef guys and people that haven't fed before, is just understanding how to compare, you know, your protein feeds, canola feed,
yes,
wheat and things like that, because they just look at the price and they go, and they think it's
just feed.
The same. It's just feed. Right?
Just feed.
But they don't understand, you know, whether you're chasing protein.
It depends on why you're buying the feed, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So
canola's a pretty expensive energy source, but it can be a good value protein source.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's been really good for people to get their head around that.
Yep.
But see, all this drought stuff, no one's actually come up with like ration formulations, you know, like which I think people need as well.
I don't know if people are going to.
So much this, so much
Yeah.
that.
It's a one-on-one thing, Ron.
Yeah, I know.
Rod, sorry.
But
That one.
it hasn't been out there for people to do it, you know, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I think you know, ration formulation. There's some basic stuff that a lot of people can do on the back of an envelope that's pretty safe. But complex ration, when they talk about the margins that really matter, you know, doing that without appropriate training can be pretty fraught, to be honest. If you blow 30 or 40 cents because you're not getting your modelling right, you can look at the payback then on having someone support you for that over time. You know, it's probably not a bad spend for a lot of farms. Yeah.
Or you can have taking stock done at the moment.
Absolutely.
You've already paid for it with the levy, so taking stock one-on-one
No, we've
consult.
already had two of those.
Yeah, well, let's talk and tell me when it was, because we're in a new financial.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
And
we did one with a follow-up, but that was a while
Previous
ago.
financial
Yeah,
year.
Yep.
So
I was just wondering if there's any more available.
there are more available
After,
until the end of the financial year.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there might be someone up here doing them from the 9th of December for a week. Okay, there might be. All right. Contact Sheena. Yeah. Yeah. All right, but this is cool, and I think it's one of those practical little tools that I think just helps you with when you're on the spot looking at two feeds that have been sent to you. Which one do I buy? This can help clarify your decision making if you don't have someone to give you some additional support.
But yeah,
Right.
we had like 2 visits from the guy,
Yes.
and he saw we had 600 rolls of, I know it was only sorghum silage.
Yep.
He said, oh, he's a bit short of cash. He said, get rid of some of that.
He was looking at it from a different perspective.
And
Yep.
I said, no, I'm looking at that because if I've suddenly got no feed, I've got feed there.
Yep.
He said, but you got no cash. I said, well, just sitting there. I said, no, but it's like money in the bank to me.
Yep.
He was more financial.
Yes.
And that suited.
And that can be perfectly appropriate.
It did work.
So I think, and Sheena, sorry, see you, Warren, take care. See you, my pleasure, take care. See you, Kyle, thank you for coming. The taking stock can have different slant on it. Under this program, it's not linked to having to run through your figures and financials. I guess most of the ones I've been doing, we've done a bit of that, but it's been about practical solutions for what people can do with what they've got.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it does vary.
Changed in format over the years, and it's been purely to meet the needs of whatever it is that you need.
So
We chose who we chose last time.
yeah.
And
Suited the need.
that's right, you've got to get the right person.
So-
To tell me
Yeah.
to sell silage and hay was like red rag to a bull, you know, like.
He pulled different things out of it to what I did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone will hear different things in the same conversation. That's the wonderful thing. Yeah. So look, look, we've done mastitis workups. We took out a strep ag problem in one herd with it. There's been a whole heap of different things been done. I've got to do an HR one in 2 days about setting up labour stuff for people. So it's, yeah. All right, so look, the NDF thing is important, all right? And again, I like to think about NDF. If there's one thing you want to see on a feed test, particularly when you're buying it for energy, it is, Ron, Rod, sorry.
Yeah.
If I keep calling you Ron, just forgive me.
Right. Just don't call me late for food.
I won't call you, yeah. Exactly, I won't do that, I wouldn't dream of it. Understanding your feed, if you look at any feed, all right, there's 5 components to it in general. If you broadly cut it back, there's the NDF or the fibre, yeah? Okay, there's what we call the NFCs, the sugars, the starches, the readily available fermentable carbohydrates. Okay, there's the fat in most feeds, there's the crude protein, all right, and then there's the ash. And the ash is the minerals, all right, the stuff that's not digestible but it has a mineral value. And basically, when you think about a feed, you think about this being really digestible, good feed value, this being pretty digestible and good value, or really highly, this being pretty digestible and good value, all right? And this is moderately digestible, the NDF fraction, or the fibre fraction, all right? But the bigger that NDF is, takes up of the wheel, the less of the other feeds that are left, the other good bits. So we work backwards from that. If I've got a 45% NDF cereal hay and a 55% NDF cereal hay, okay, I've got 10% more good stuff in one compared to the other. And that's a really simple back of the envelope or back of the brain way of thinking about how do I compare these two feeds. Because the other thing that happens, all right, as the NDF rises within a particular feed type, the fibre gets less digestible, all right? So the NDF in a 50% NDF wheat hay is less digestible than the NDF in a 60% NDF hay, all right? Because it gets more lignin per unit of NDF as that NDF goes up, all right? But if you think about it, your bucket is having 5 ingredients in it, and that always has to add up to 100%. We'll always work backwards from that NDF, and that'll give you a pretty good indication. Now that needs to be compared within the same type of forage, because all forages that their fibre portion is differently digestible. Okay, so I would much rather have, for example, a 50% NDF cereal hay than a 45% NDF lucerne. All right, because the digestibility of that wheat hay will be much higher than that lucerne hay. I need to get my NDF in lucerne down below 40%, and then it's really cracking. It's really, really good. But that jump from 40 through to 45, it loses a whole heap of digestibility to the fibre component in particular. So look, here's just a few feed tests that we've seen, and I just want you to have a look at these. So this is a wheaten hay. What do you see on here, guys, when you look at it that's a bit interesting? This was sent to us as a wheat hay feed test.
Can't see much.
Sorry. Come up close to this room, because there's a few of these.
It's not real dry.
It's not real dry. Okay, so what's that tell you? Well, if it is actually hay, you'd want to have bloody good insurance. Okay.
Perhaps it's age.
Well, it was sold as a hay, but what's happened, this has been picked up off the ground 2 or 3 days before it's been cured. okay, and sent off so it's ready when they do the feed, when they go to sell it. Okay, so it's probably overestimating the quality of that hay because you do get a burn down,
Protein will drop.
the protein and the NFCs, which pushes the NDF high. Because you look at the NDF on this, holy goodness. If you had a 44% NDF hay available to you, you'd buy as much of it as you could possibly afford because this is every bit as good to you as most of the feed you can grow. All right, so it's a really, really good feed. Okay, it's 75% digestible. All right, but you just got to be a bit worried about this.
So it's going to be baled in 2 days' time.
Well, that's right. So you'd want to get it perhaps retested. But it's just one of those little traps when you're looking at a feed test. Okay, that's just worth keeping your eye out for. Okay, here's another wheat hay. Same thing. Okay, this is from paddocks 3 and 4. It was 23%. It was still at 76%. So this has not been made yet. But you look at this one. All right. So if you were going to choose between these two, which one would you buy? If you knew they'd been finished off, but these are the only feed tests you had. Which one are you going to buy?
The one on the left.
One on the left, eh? Yeah. This has come back as an 8.5 megajoule hay already.
Yeah.
So the time it's actually finished, it's only going to be about an 8, I reckon.
Straw.
It's basically straw, Scotty. All right. Okay, so this was sent to me to get an opinion. And you can see here, and this is where it gets interesting, there's nearly 3 megajoules difference in hay quality there. So if you're feeding 5 kilos of each of those hays, all right, how much milk difference is that? It's 3 litres of milk. 3 litres of milk in a high production system, okay? Maybe 2 in a lower production system, all right? Because you don't always get the 1-for-1 that we expect. So that's profound, okay? So if that was 3 litres at $150, oh sorry, at 50 cents a litre, you know, you can pay a lot more for that hay, okay, of better quality and still be at a better position with respect to profit. Because for every 50 bucks a tonne it goes up in price, so say it was 50 bucks a tonne difference, at 5 kilos feeding, right, you'd be feeding only 25 cents more worth of hay. Because 50 bucks a tonne's worth 5 cents a kilo as fed, okay? 5 kilos of that fed would cost you another 25 cents. It's more expensive, but if it modelled out and gave us 3 more litres of milk, it's a pretty good buy. If it gave it 2 more litres of milk, it's a good buy. If it's 1 litre of milk extra from that better hay, it's still an acceptable buy. Okay, so this is why we've got to look at margin over cost responses, not just the cost.
I've never done the numbers from my head, but I'll come up with $350 more to pay.
You could pay. It'd be something like that, Josh. It's huge and still be better off. Okay, so if we're talking about 50 bucks difference.
Not that you get any production out of that one anyway. But
No. But look, if that was close to home and cheap and you just needed a couple of kilos of hay, we could possibly use that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, what have we got here? Here's another wheat hay. This is pretty good stuff too, I think. Yeah, this is pretty Goldilocks-y sort of hay. It's a 49% NDF, 10.9, 92% dry matter. This is going to be a really nice hay. And these are quite typical of some of the early season hays we've seen come off this year, if you're out there looking. Okay, there's money to be made in feeding this hay, well, there's margin to be made, okay, in feeding this. So let's not talk about making money, let's talk about making margin. And if you can get onto these hays and start feeding cows before they get turned down over summer, and that's one of the really, really important things, is don't let things slip because it's really hard to get them back from now on. Okay, these quality hays are really, really good value. What's this one? This is a canola, another cereal, okay, and again, just not as good as that previous one. Protein 5.9, all right. Where's the NDF on this guy here? NDF at 52, okay, the digestibility drops right down, all right, and the ME is down below 10. So again, it's not a bad hay, but it's a lower protein hay, so there's big differences in what we're seeing out there. I don't know if you can see that, but this is a vetch hay sample, all right? Now this vetch hay came back with an NDF of 35.4 and an ME of nearly 12. All right. So these vetch hays are fantastic hays if you can source them, and in some rations it can be worth the extra freight and the cost to get them home. All right, based on some of those calculations we talked about then, Josh. You've just got to do that number on what it can potentially do with respect to margin over feed cost. Now, I tend to be really conservative, and I do this when people try to sell stuff to farms as well. They say if you use molecule X and it's going to give you a litre, so you should do that because it's only going to cost you 30 cents. I tend to look at things and say, well, if I get half that response, is it still a winner? All right, and if it's still a winner, then we might think about it depending on the science. And similarly with feeding, we've got to be really careful with just translating straight ME to production, particularly in drought-stressed herds. It's a really, really important factor because quite a lot of the time, if herds have been drought-stressed and we go in and say, you need to feed more and you'll get this great response, you don't get it. Okay, because the cows have been run down, they're at the wrong stage of production, they put body condition back on, the heifers are small and they keep growing, they haven't been able to afford the worm and do parasites, so you lose responses there. So there's a whole heap of things that you need to be really careful with when you're thinking about what responses am I going to get. It's not just as simple as 5 megajoules makes a litre. Okay, so it's all those feed conversion efficiency drivers that we talked about before start to kick in when you're moving from a low plane to a higher plane. All right, so the critical thing is that if you're at a reasonable plane, hold the plane and edge up from there. It's a bit of wheat and canola, and here's a really good example. So we've got a 47% NDF wheat and a 42% NDF canola, which you'd say, well, the canola should be better based on NDF alone. All right, but the actual MEs are 10.9 compared to 9.5. And a lot about this is around that indigestibility of the fibre in canola once it gets more fibrous. All right, where the wheat fibre is highly digestible. Okay, to a point. To a point. So it's not as simple as just saying those two should be better. You need to have a bit of a look at these other things like the dry matter digestibility. Okay, so 73% compared to 65%. And that can be driven by ash fractions and other things as well. But a lot of the time it's around that lignification of the fibre. Does that all make sense? Cool. Okay, here's another set of canola hays, which we touched on before. Okay, and these were sent by a client, all off the same farm down at Harden. All right. So again, they've probably made them a little bit late. Okay, but again, we've got a big difference in the NDFs here. All right, so this is going to be, a significantly better feed, more than likely. Okay, but again, not amazing ME values on these despite the NDFs. And again, particularly here, once you get up into the mid-40s, you're crashing way down. But this is what's important here, the nitrates. Yep.
What level are you aiming to be under?
Look, we'd love that to be, under 500. Okay, we're getting up into this zone as a sole feed. This can cause serious problems. All right. So being aware, any canola or anyone that that's buying canola, they need to nitrate test. Okay. I avoid it like the plague if it's going to go out in the racks without regulation. We could use this, if we needed to in a TMR reasonably safely and with slow introduction, but you need to be able to blend it back in. Okay, because we've also got to remember that these were just the bales that were tested. All right, and across any population, you've got a distribution of values. Okay, there could be one sitting out there that's 15,000 from a corner of the paddock that got a bit stressed. All right, and it's quite, we certainly had some reports coming from out in the northwest of when the cattle have been on canola hay, then one day they've walked in and there's 15 or 20 dead because they've hit a hot bale. So, this is right in my risk zone, and I've seen that higher. I've seen that up in the 20s and 30s in some forages.
Like sorghum hays?
Depends on the nitrates in it. That'll be higher than vast majority of sorghum hays, okay? But if you've got sorghum, so your two key stresses in sorghum are nitrate and prussic acid or cyanide, okay? And again, the prussic tends to be more a function of stress crop, okay? And the nitrate can be stress crop or other factors, including the nitrates or the nitrogen in the soils in the growth stage. So look, if you're all suspicious with sorghums, okay, again, some feed testing, really, really good. What surprised me is that many people running around doing sap nitrates around the place.
No.
Yeah.
The doing here a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
So the LLS, we've got some kits.
Yep. Yeah, cool.
Where you do dip tests.
Yep.
Gives you an indication.
Yep.
Just it gives you an indication of over 2,000.
Yeah, whether you're at a level, if you're in the red zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a bit of a check. I better get that tested.
Yep.
Or it should be okay. That's
But
basically
it's often why you keep a few steers, they're less valuable, you just let them in there first. But look, any new feed, and this is really important in drought, the rules are, you know, little bit to introduce, okay, small amounts, regular observation, okay. We'd often say fill them up with something first if they're going to go on a paddock of sorghum. Go down half an hour after they've been let in, go down an hour after they've been let in, because if they keel over or get crook, it tends to be pretty quick. You don't put them into a new paddock of sorghum when they've never seen it before and it's got a nasty little blue colour in the corner because it's stressed, and leave them there overnight and hope that they're all going to be standing there the next day. Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
And transition.
Transition's a critical thing, Josh, absolutely. But again, you know, really important, and these guys, they did the due diligence on their own feed. This is a big beef sheep producer I work with out there. And basically, we've got these crops, we've cut them, what are we going to do with them? Okay. Luckily, they've got a mixer wagon as well, so we'll be able to blend these back in with other forages and utilise it that way. Yeah.